Well, here we are again. Those two you already know. Those two you might not, even though if you paid attention to my talk, you would. These are the co-authors of the Gaming the Future book that I mentioned at the beginning. And Mark Miller has been a security pioneer for a really long time and is a Foresight Senior Fellow. And Christine Peterson co-founded Foresight Institute, the organization that I now lead and is credited with coining the term open source software. So we have a really interesting panel. I think we want to get into a few of the questions that I broadly touched on during the intro talk, and maybe also in your unique perspectives on that issue, because you're all coming from different fields, and so it's really interesting, I think, to hear your specific perspectives on this. So if we can just have a fire round and keep your comments short and sweet on, where do you think the future is headed? Is it going towards more in a centralized versus decentralized framing? And I know this is not cutting it, but you can probably provide more color on it if I just give you these very hand wavy concepts. So why don't we start with Max, and then we literally just go and trickle down here.
Where's the future headed? One thing that I really would like to do is to operationalize decentralized versus centralized on in what way are you talking about? Because when you say decentralized versus centralized, it's like a pattern matching between, does this look like a distributed network or does this look like a single node network? But I think I like the way that some basically business strategists would think about it. So I would think about the different levels, like the stack, the AI stack, the application layer. There's the layer of the models themselves. There is the model serving platforms. There's the actual hardware too. And so you could talk about how centralized or how many actors there are at every layer of the stack. And I think it's not clear. I think it's clear that I would be very surprised if training in the future was very decentralized. I suspect there's a lot of returns to centralization there. But on the others, I think it's varying, and I can elaborate more. But since you wanted it to be rapid fire, I'll pause there.
Cool. Okay, I like the stack distinction. Abhinav.
I'll extend to what Max said. So I feel like both the worlds are going to exist in front of us. The clear winner will definitely be the one where users feel that they are more empowered, they're more secure, there is more privacy to their data, to the way they interact with AI. And I feel like there would be different use cases where each of those technologies would be beneficial in different aspects. But I feel like the winner, or the one that will go really in the long run, would be the one where there would be more security and privacy for the users interacting with the technology.
I like a lot of the themes we're all discussing. I think I want to focus on this issue of the inevitable arms race in each separate domain between offense and defense, and trying to project those arms races into the future based on what we know about the underlying nature of the system, and try to get a sense of, does the offense side or the defense side naturally get a decisive advantage in the arms race? And for those systems, I would argue, at the computer security level of abstraction in the digital realm, where defense does eventually arrive at a decisive advantage over offense. And we know this because all the principles necessary were discovered, most of them by the end of the 1970s, some of them in the 90s. And essentially, we know everything we need to know technologically to build secure operating systems, provably secure operating systems, languages, and cryptographic protocols. Adoption-wise, we've only gotten the massive adoption for the cryptographic protocols. In addition, the big unsolved problem back then was the supply chain risk. We got that solved with blockchain as a first solution. There's other solutions possible. The physical realm, to take the other side of the spectrum, is one where naturally the offense has a decisive advantage over the defense, simply because it's easier to destroy than it is to defend against destruction. And historically, it's always been the case that the solutions we've had in the physical realm to that ease of destruction was to build some kind of more or less centralized institution. And the more centralized it is, the more dangers of corruption. So the hard challenge in the across all of these realms, but especially the hardest one being in the physical realm, is how to arrange as decentralized as possible means to bring about a long-term decisive advantage of defense over offense.
Cool. Christine?
Yeah, I'm not a computer scientist, but I'd like to just ask a question, which is, are we sure that large language models, the way we're training them today, is this the ultimate for intelligence in machines? Might there not be other ways to do artificial intelligence programming? Are you looking at me, Mark, like you want to answer the question? Okay, well, great. What's the answer?
Mark.
Okay, I got it. Okay. So the answer is probably not. Jan LeCun, one of the winners, I think, of the Turing Award for the transformer models, he is very strongly of the opinion, having been a major creator of these language models, he is very much of the opinion that to get to AGI, you have to start with something other than LLMs. I was just hearing from a Ravi Pandya of Foresight, just hearing about how miserable these LLMs do, including the long chains of thought, at solving blocks world planning problems when the logic of the blocks world problem is encoded in other words, so it can't simply do pattern matching against the text that exists about blocks world problems. And they're awful at it.
Is that it? Okay, yes. Well, I was sort of hinting at that might be the answer. So if that is the answer, that's going to affect this question of decentralization versus centralization. These LLMs take a huge amount of compute, an awful lot of data. Can we find other ways? And if we do find another way, I think that might lead to a lot more decentralization potentially.
So you think really like I guess like Max and Christine, you both kind of agree that like it's in the training basically, and like, the training will mostly affect whether or not we'll have a centralized system or not, and the types of models that we're training.
I would elaborate, I guess, and say that the question of centralization and decentralization is different at the level of the supply chain for training the models versus the models themselves. So I think that how I like to think about it is the incentives that shape the distribution of models. I mean, one question is like, why do people open source their models? What does that lead to? What is the future of that? I think that I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that there's not going to just be a single model provided by a single provider. But if you think about like different innovative dilemmas and different economic incentives, it could well be that maybe AWS or Microsoft just wins the training infrastructure race, and they all have their nuclear power plants that train all the AI data centers. Or it could be, as Christine was hinting at, maybe there's probabilistic machine learning, and we only need a laptop to be able to do it. But that's hard to say in the next 5 years.
Okay, let's get maybe into some of the possible downsides, upsides, and how we can build for them. Like, when you think about like, the future in general, like, and you all have very diversified perspectives on centralized, decentralized, and that like hand wavy, even just like trying to just integrate them. But like, what are you specifically worried about looking ahead into the future? And like, what do you think we can build today to account for that? Like, if you think about differential tech development or something, like what's something that you want to point people to, in addition to like the specific risks that you're most concerned about? Whoever wants, do you want to go first?
What scares me the most would be cyber attack, just because it's much easier to twiddle bits than it is to twiddle atoms. And I think we're very badly set up for defense right now. So what I would suggest is, how about if we do distributed red teaming and compensate folks for doing that. And we need to start right now.
I have one take on that as well. There should be a clear definition on what we are defining as centralized, decentralized, open source, closed source, and so on. Like, for example, Allison, you had a slide on DeepSeek. Now, one of the things with that everyone has observed is that, you know, it's an open source model, but if you ask it a question about Tiananmen Square, I think one of the historic events from the region where the model comes from, it refuses to give you any answer about that. So is it fair to still call that model an open source? That's like one.
But it allows others to build systems, like to basically use that infrastructure to then build other models that allow you to ask questions about the Tiananmen DeepSeek.
Yeah, the thing about DeepSeek being open source is that the means by which the weights were arrived at has not been open. There is no open ability to reproduce a set of weights that are like the DeepSeek weights. So I would say that that's partially open. With that out there, and given the fact that there are genuinely trained open large language models like Llama, I think we should look forward to there being genuinely open training systems where they're trained in the open from open corpuses, and where all of the random inputs are either made pseudo-random or logged random inputs, so that exactly the weights arrived at, that were allegedly arrived at by the open process, can be reproduced deterministically from the same corpus and the same random inputs to create the same weights.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Just getting back to the problem, you were really worried about cyber risk and cyber attack. Anyone else want to throw something? I saw a head nodding for that one. Like, I think we can all agree we're worried about that one. Anyone else want to throw one into the hat? And especially, how can we build for it now?
I mean, my lightning talk was pretty much around that, and it feels like I said early on as well that I guess whichever model, whichever approach, or whichever technique we pick up, however we build up the models, whether LLM is the right way or not moving forward, whether it's agent and everything, I guess cybersecurity or the security, the way individuals interact with it, the type of responses they give, how much can we trust them, really having that trustworthiness and security and sense of peace when using the technology, I guess that is going to be the core in making sure that it evolves in a proper way.
Yeah, I might add, I mean, there's a lot of things that I could enumerate that are potentially concerning, from the biological risk side to the cybersecurity side. And also I'm really concerned about how people can make sense of, like, we're social creatures, we evolve through cultural evolution. I think it's pretty bad if most of the content we can't distinguish whether it's, generated from someone who has different interests than ours. But in terms of the second part of your question, which is what things or what kinds of things can we build or do about it, I would take the gist of my talk and present it here. I would want for us to broaden our sense of what we've been calling technology to things that are not, the cutting edge or sexiest tech. And I would include things like almost like psychotherapy as a form of psychotechnology, as like a very crucial thing to raising the sanity waterline. And like I was talking about KYC controls, it's like, is a protocol for figuring out if the person you're talking to is an AI or not, is that a technology? I think it doesn't have to be programmed in software to be considered a technology. And so I would push to lots of those kind of traditional things as things that we can build to address, the cyber and our informational hazards.
Yeah. So when I talk about we've solved the engineering problems of secure computing at the level of security per se, there's two things that I left out. One is we have not solved the adoption problem except for the crypto protocols. The adoption of the crypto protocols through open source efforts in building them and human eyeballs verifying them. That was the great success of the cypherpunks, a small group of open source activists winning the first crypto war against the US national security system. That's an extraordinary accomplishment, and part of it is overcoming exactly the resistance you just mentioned, which is people were using HTTP. HTTP became the entrenched protocol for a while, specifically because of the US government export controls during the crucial emergence. But even though most people didn't care, the people who cared got enough people to care by publicizing the dangers that eventually, over many years, there was this market replacement with secure protocols. The issues of the economic and sociological things that keep the massively insecurable infrastructure that we've got with terrible operating systems for essentially everything all across the world, we need to understand how to arrange the economics and sociology so as to overturn that.
I guess, yeah.
Could I add color to that?
Do
Because
it.
I just came from a week and a half ago. I was at this cyber biosecurity conference, and I think this is now public, so I can talk about it a bit. But I'm all for red teaming. Red teaming is definitely great when we make it specific and operationalize it. But one of the things that they did at this conference was they pulled up a combine. So this is one of these huge pieces of agricultural equipment that plows the fields and lets you sow seeds. And they had someone on the stage in 30 minutes basically remotely access the combine and rev the engine. So there was basically a remote vulnerability, but the core thing about that interaction was first, is this unusual about this particular combine? He's like, nope, it uses the CAN, a CAN bus, which is a standard protocol for cars. And he's like, we've red teamed this. We knew that you can do this, but every single car and every single piece of agricultural equipment relies on this fundamentally vulnerable protocol. And so you can do all the red teaming you want, but unless there's actually a law or something that really causes the upgrade of, from the CAN protocol, you're not going to fix it.
So there's a practice in computer security of combined the bug bounty and responsible disclosure. They're somewhat independent, but they're often combined.
Does everyone here know what that combination means?
Okay.
Or maybe just say a few words about it.
I'll just say a few words. I'll leave aside the bug bounty. It's probably more obvious. Responsible disclosure is when a red team discovers a vulnerability and writes an exploit that enables the exploitation of the vulnerability. They disclose it to the proprietors of the software that is vulnerable with a deadline, typically like 6 months. In 6 months, you have to either fix it or demonstrate good faith effort, enough good faith effort that I'm satisfied that you're really trying to fix it, or at the end of the deadline, we open source the attack, enabling the entire world to now attack you and bring you down. And that has been, we've seen that. That is an effective way to get companies to fix their software.
So Max, in your situation, are you saying they knew about that vulnerability, they had red teamed it before, they found out about it, but it was just still prevalent in the systems and they were just relying on not many people knowing?
Some version of that. It's that even if you tell John Deere or whatever that their software is vulnerable in this way, the problem is bigger than they can solve. It's like, it's like asking a particular website to rewrite a whole networking protocol, because the CAN is just like a universe. It's like a standard across the whole industry. So you can't really expect a company of 50 to 100 people to rewrite HTTP.
Okay, so now we've got the existing LLMs are quite useful at writing code, not reliably. They're getting better at creating proofs of theorems, but still there's a long way to go. But when we think about this arms race between the red teams and the companies that are about to get smashed, we should factor in that AI amplifies both sides of that. And in this case, that's uniformly beneficial. It helps the red team find the attack and disclose it, hopefully responsibly. It demonstrates, by virtue of the fact that AI helped them find the vulnerability, that other AIs that are not beneficially inclined could easily find the vulnerability as well, so it even works without the deadline. And it helps the defenders get onto a technological treadmill where they are better able to rewrite and fix and adversariously examine their code so that it meets the needs of the code, but now has fixed the vulnerability that the red team identified.
All right, well, maybe we'll leave that one here, but that's terrifying. And I want to also move towards, like if we think about decentralization and if we think about like open source, like we might not just care about it for some of the better red teaming that it enables or some of the better like, open system design that it like tends to come with, but also for distinct benefits of open source, right? Like, and I really want to hear from you having been involved so much in the early development of the open source community and of the open source software community, and it having been like such a striking also feature to influence much of our work at Foresight. Like, how do you think about distinct benefits that could be unlocked with more decentralized open AI development? If we don't just think about red teaming AI, but like if we now lift our gaze a bit and think about, okay, what could some of the benefits be?
Yeah, if we think about, all right, what will the centralized efforts focus on? Well, we know they want money. Let's make money. Another that maybe equal to that or just under that is military. Let's get very good at defense and maybe also even offense. So these are the interests of the centralized efforts, and they're going to be running as fast as they can to do those things because that's what they do. So if it's more decentralized, what other more creative or interesting topics could we address? Well, I would love to see these powerful AIs unleashed on the topic of human aging and longevity and disease, right? The human body is the most complex system that we know of, so let's take the systems that are best able to grapple with complexity and throw that power at medicine and see what we can do there. That's what I would like to see.
I think in general, just like somewhat more of an incentivization and direction of AGI towards like AI for like actually solving really interesting scientific problems that like affect all of humanity would be awesome. And maybe we go with Abhinav next, just because you've said not as much on the panel yet. What do you think?
There is one thing that I wanted to ask Christine as well. Open Source Institute, they came up with a report on what really open source models really mean. The one thing that I keep stressing on is that we should have a very clear understanding of what centralized AI systems would mean, what decentralized systems would mean. We don't want to land into a situation where there is a hybrid where a corporate comes in and says that, hey, we are decentralized because our training and everything is pretty much done on nodes spread across the internet, but the model is only accessible to certain set of people or certain set of industries and so on. So really having that definition well defined, well set up, I feel like would give people a lot more confidence. For example, open source software is very well known that anything whose code is available, there is a license attached to it about how anyone can modify it, how anyone can use it, and so on. It's pretty well known. But at this point, things related with large language models or AI technology in general, what would really open source mean? What would really decentralized mean? I feel like it's still not that clear.
Okay, we exactly disagree. Open source software, when software needs to be something that a large community can have high confidence in its reliability and security, open source is the best way to go there. Two examples of that. The one practical, high-performance proven secure operating system, SEL4, is open source and has been, and open source with the open ability to rerun the proof that the operating system is secure. So as a mechanized proof that is also something everyone can rerun. I think the mistake you might be making is this thing about everyone can modify it, everyone can fork, but there's still, for each of those forks, there is a competition for reputation of reliability, and there's openness of the sociological process by which that fork is maintained. There's limited commitment authority, and it hinges on the reputation of both who the committers are and what the open process is that people. So also, crypto protocols are open source, and then the modern meaning of crypto, i.e. Blockchain, cryptocurrency, and especially smart contracts, across that entire industry, for which there would normally be, you would think, many benefits to making things proprietary, because there's this huge externality of efforts that people are pouring millions of dollars into. Nevertheless, the ethic that's completely prevalent across that industry is develop everything in the open.
All right, we have to leave it at this. Max, do you have a final word on this?
I think there are a number of exciting things. Maybe one thing that I'm quite excited about is taking seriously the literature on pedagogy and making it so that each person can have, access to the Bloom's 2 sigma effect, where you can get really personalized, good learning. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there, and for me, that's something that I'm excited about.
Awesome. Well, if you want to discuss more of this, we only managed to scratch the surface here. We have a workshop that's starting in 10 minutes, I think, downstairs, where we're going to dive into this a little bit more collectively. And yeah, thank you so much. That was really fun. And I'm always happy to chat more, especially about the SEL4 piece that's been coming up over and over again in the past few days. Thank you, guys. That was very fun. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison.